difference will it make to you?
That was a programme for the foundation course Living with Technology, and since it was made, the store computer system has been expanded. The cash registers can now communicate directly with a computer in Phoenix, Arizona for verification of credit cards. And tonight's radio programme for this course will explain some of the implications of the money transfer machines shown in the film. You can hear this programme at 25 minutes to midnight, and that's on Radio 3 VHF. You're reminded that your next television programme will be shown in just under 3 weeks' time. That's after the Easter holiday, and it'll examine fundamental concepts of modern communication theory. Well, that's on Sunday, the 26th of April, and it's at 20 to 8 in the morning on BBC2. On the 1st of January this year, Professor John Horlock became Vice-Chancellor of the Open University, and on Sunday we shall be repeating the edition of Open Forum in which he spoke at the OU Graduates Press Conference. That's Open Forum on Sunday morning at 11:25, and again it's here on BBC2. If you're not a student at the Open University and would like to know about the courses available to you in 1982, you can write for a free copy of the Guide for Applicants, which is available now. This book will give you full details of how to apply for registration as a student, and you're advised to write as soon as possible on a postcard, please, to this address. Admissions Office, the Open University, P.O. Box 48, Milton Keynes, MK7 6AB. Admissions Office, the Open University, P.O. Box 48, Milton Keynes, MK7 6AB. And there we end today's programmes for the Open University. BBC2's programmes for this evening begin now with the last film in the series, which looks at artists in print.
Cork Street represents the top end of the market in original prints, made and signed by the artist in limited editions. This commercial gallery also publishes them. Alan Christia.
I think people mostly think of publishers as just book publishers. They always make that association, but print publishers are very much the same thing in the sense that they commission editions and they finance editions. At the moment we have a Hockney exhibition on. Hockney is not one...
...nor a bad reason. I think what's important is that you understand your own motives so that you know why you want it, and therefore you can search for what you want.
Is this the one you meant?
Yes, I think so. There's another colour. Yes, that's the one.
It's silkscreen print.
How much is it?
It's £70.
Marvellous. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you again.
A BBC book to accompany the series is available from bookshops, price £9.95, and an exhibition linked to the series is on show for another 2 weeks at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London. BBC One shortly embarks on another Star Trek, this week to encounter the lights of Zetar. While on BBC Two we visit California as Cameo takes us to Salton Sea, a refuge for wildlife with rippling water and the cries of the birds.
Yes, I think so. There's another colour. Yes, that's the one.
It's silkscreen print.
How much is it?
It's £70.
Marvellous.
Print.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you again.
A BBC book to accompany the series is available from bookshops, price £9.95, and an exhibition linked to the series is on show for another 2 weeks at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London. BBC One shortly embarks on another Star Trek this week to encounter the lights of Zeta, while on BBC Two we visit California as Cameo takes us to Salton Sea, a refuge for wildlife with rippling water and the cries of the birds. These are BBC Two's programmes for the rest of this Monday evening. In a moment, the news. Then at 7:40, Roots of England visits the Cotswold village of Guyting Par, now a thriving community thanks largely to the efforts of its most recent lord of the manor. Marty Kane at 8:15 is joined by Shawadi Wadi, Joy and the jazz violinist Bruce Dukov. And then at 9, for the last time in the present series, we take a stroll down the corridors of Par in Westminster. Horizon at 9:30 reports from east of Bombay on the efforts of 2 Indian doctors to establish a new concept in healthcare. Baby Grand will be saying it again at 10:20, and the evening ends with Newsnight at 10:45. So now, at just after 7:30, the mid-evening news on BBC Two with Richard Baker.
Mr. Brezhnev looks on as Czechoslovak communist leaders warn Poland not to turn away from the socialist path. Tomorrow, the Soviet leader will deliver a personal address to the 16th Congress of the Czechoslovak Communist Party, a speech that's eagerly and anxiously awaited throughout the communist world. Today, he listened from a place of honor as the Czechoslovak leader, Mr. Husak, condemned the events in Poland. From Prague, Maurice Gent reports.
At the beginning of the Congress, Mr. Brezhnev received a standing ovation from the strongly loyal Czechoslovak party. With the Soviet leader, Mr. Brezhnev, sitting impassively on the rostrum, the Czechoslovak party chief delivered what was clearly a grave warning to the West. International imperialism is trying to weaken our unity, he said. It's been tried before in East Germany, Hungary and Czechoslovakia, he went on, but it hasn't worked. Now the West is trying to pull Poland out of our socialist community. He pledged that the Czechoslovak party, together with the Czechoslovak people and the peoples of other Warsaw Pact nations, would go to the support of Polish patriots and communists in their fight against the forces of reaction. In other words, this was the Czechoslovak leader saying that if a military intervention was decided on, it would have the backing of Czechoslovakia.
Mrs. Thatcher has sent a letter to President Brezhnev warning him against Soviet intervention in Poland. The Prime Minister told the Soviet leader that the British people believes the Polish people should be able to decide their own future in a peaceful manner without outside interference. Poland is bound to be discussed at a meeting tomorrow of NATO defense ministers. Today, the American Defense Secretary, Mr. Caspar Weinberger, and his British counterpart, Mr. John Nott, visited RAF Cottesmore, where NATO pilots are trained on the new Tornado aircraft. Our defence correspondent, Christopher Wade, reports.
The two ministers were at Cottesmore to see if the idea of international design could be adapted to a joint Anglo-American project. But it's likely they spent most of the time discussing the latest move in Poland. For Mr. Weinberger, it's a question of trying to assess Soviet policy at a time when information is limited and the Russians are being deliberately obscure. But when he talked to the press, he made an intriguing suggestion. has a disguised occupation of Poland already begun?
Well, I think the problem here all along has been that it's very hard to tell whether there's going to be a standard conventional type invasion, so to speak, or invasion by osmosis, in which there's a gradual filtering in, additions to the divisions that have already been in, Russian divisions that have been in Poland for a long time. The whole activity can't fail but be very intimidating and coercive, and that's what I think its intent is.
In Barbados, a magistrate has ruled that papers seeking the extradition to Britain of train robber Ronald Biggs are in order. Lawyers for Biggs were hoping he would be freed because the documents were wrongly drafted. Biggs was abducted last month to Barbados from Brazil, where he'd been living for several years. The extradition hearing is continuing in Bridgetown, from where Christopher Morris reports.
At the island's prison, Biggs has had to wait 5 days for today's crucial decision by the chief magistrate. And following last week's dramatic adjournment, after his lawyers claimed the British extradition documents were not in order, Biggs had been hopeful of the case being thrown out. Along with several other high-security risk prisoners, he was brought to court, where once again police officers were able to get the train robber inside without the waiting crowds catching even a glimpse of him. Also at today's hearing was Detective Chief Superintendent Van Dyke. He had been sent from London to give evidence on the extradition documents and to join the other 2 Scotland Yard detectives from the extradition squad who've now been waiting in Barbados for 10 days, hoping to escort Biggs back to prison at Wandsworth, from where he escaped nearly 16 years ago.
The world's largest firefighting appliance, the 12,000-ton emergency support vessel for the North Sea, has been launched on the Clyde. Built at the Scott Lithgow yard of British shipbuilders, the £60 million vessel, named Iolair, the Gallic for Eagle, is the first of her kind to be built in Britain. Ian Ross reporting.
She will in fact be 3/4 owned and used by BP for oil platform maintenance, for inspection, for diving, as a workshop, as a helicopter base, and of course for fighting fires. She'll ply between the Forties and the Thistle fields. Twin pontoons carry the 6 columns supporting the main platform, which is complete with hospital and accommodation for 200. With a propeller on each pontoon, she can make a respectable 12 knots. Semi-submersibles are usually floated out from dry docks, but Iolair was launched like a ship, and it all went perfectly. Shall now have the rest of the fitting out undertaken. There'll be a period of very exhaustive and very extensive commissioning trials, and she'll be formally handed over about the end of September. And then towards the end of the year, she'll take up her position in the North Sea as the most complex vessel in that sector, and also as the most valuable single commercial order ever undertaken by a British shipyard.
A bomb has exploded outside the British consulate in Guatemala on the day talks were opening in London on the future of the neighbouring Central American state of Belize. There was no serious damage to the building in Guatemala City. The military government there has always maintained a territorial claim to Belize, and this has held up the granting of independence. The Deputy Prime Minister of Belize is attending the London conference. The country has been self-governing since 1963, but 1,500 British troops guard the Guatemalan border. British proposals to allow Guatemala use of Belize's ports in return for ending territorial claims have been described by opposition parties as a sellout. Lord Carrington, now ending his Far Eastern tour, has arrived in Tokyo. Before leaving China, the Foreign Secretary visited the city of Xi'an, and it was in this capital of ancient China that he was shown one of the world's most extraordinary archaeological treasures.
It may look a bit like an aircraft hangar, but this huge building was put up to protect an archaeological dig. What they have here is one of the most important and astonishing historical discoveries of the 20th century. It's a vast pottery army slowly being unearthed from the tomb where it's lain for more than 2,000 years. At one time, when a Chinese ruler died, soldiers would be buried alive with him to protect him in the spirit world. But the Emperor Qin had his spirit army made from terracotta, 7,500 life-size figures, soldiers and horses. The Emperor, the first to unite the whole of China under one ruler, conscripted 700,000 men to build his palace and tomb, and it took them 36 years. The palace has long since been reduced to dust, but his underground army survived. During the recent Cultural Revolution, China's leaders deliberately suppressed any active interest in China's history. But that too has changed, and the Pottery Army is as much an attraction for the Chinese tourists as it was for the British Foreign Secretary. This is John Humphreys, BBC, in Xi'an, China.
And now for the main points of the news again, with subtitles for the hard of hearing. The Czechoslovak Communist Party's 16th Congress has opened in Prague with a strong warning to Poland to stay in the socialist camp. The warning was endorsed by the presence of the Soviet leader, Mr. Brezhnev, who wouldn't normally attend such ordinary party occasions. The Czech leader, Gustav Husak, who came to power after the Soviet invasion of his country in 1968, said he watched events in Poland with disquiet. The Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, has sent a letter to Mr. Brezhnev warning against Soviet military intervention in Poland. A letter, described as firm in tone, says Poland should be able to decide its own future without any outside interference. In Barbados, a magistrate has ruled that the extradition papers for Ronald Biggs are in order. Lawyers for the great train robber, kidnapped last month from Brazil, had claimed the extradition papers were invalid. The official inquiry into the Irish disco fire on St. Valentine's Day has started in Dublin. 48 young people died at the Stardust Club, and the tribunal could sit for 2 months. Counsel for the inquiry said there's a serious conflict of evidence about whether some of the doors were locked or not. The world's largest firefighting machine was launched on the River Clyde today. It's been built by Scott Lithgow. The 12,000-ton support ship for the North Sea is called Iolair, Gaelic for eagle, and cost £60 million to build. That's all from us for the present. With Mr. Brezhnev at the Prague Congress, Newsnight at 10:45 looks back to the invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968 to see how close the parallel may be with Poland now. And Fran Morrison talks to Robert Altman and Shelley Duvall about their new film of Popeye. We'll now take a look at the weather.
It'll be a dry night in most parts with a touch of frost in places. Tomorrow will be dry again generally with some sunny intervals. However, in the northwest a few light showers are likely and southern areas will become cloudier later. Temperatures will be much the same as today's except in the south where it'll be a little warmer tomorrow. Well, not for the first time, there's a question of loyalty at stake this evening, and yes, Minister, with the light finally dawning on poor old Jim Hacker that he and Sir Humphrey are not necessarily on the same side. Yes, Minister, at 9 o'clock. On to now, Roots of England, as this week Brian Truman visits the Cotswold village of Guyting Power. A BBC book to accompany the Roots of England series is available from booksellers at £7.45. And in next week's programme, Brian Truman visits Cambridge to meet some members of that invaluable group of people, the college servants. In Panorama on BBC1 now, Michael Cockrell presents a report on what may be a secret connection between South Africa and the Soviet Union, the ingredients of which are gold and diamonds. On to, in a moment, the sparkling Marty Kane. Horizon tonight goes east of Bombay to a cluster of remote villages where the people, like most of India's vast population, live more or less untouched by 20th century medical progress and blighted by diseases long forgotten in the West. While most of the 10,000 doctors trained in India each year prefer the richer pickings of a city practice, Rajnikant and Mabel Arole, believing that medical knowledge should be common knowledge, came out here 10 years ago to train a group of illiterate villagers to tackle many of their own health problems. They discovered that the village health workers can often do a better job than the doctors themselves. One such worker is Salubai, a Hindu untouchable who's become one of the most respected women in her village and whose work has led not only to better health, but to dramatic social change. Horizon, east of Bombay, is tonight at 9:30 on BBC2. And on to now, it's Marty Kane.